It's going. Both in it. Mics should be working. Oh yeah, mics are on. Check. Shall we?
Yes, one sip of liquor.
A little drinky poo. I'll keep mine discreet as well.
Little sips.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, I could open up this one.
Okay. Dang.
Alright, that's all set up?
Yeah, I'll do snaps this time.
Okay.
Ready? Let's get her.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Discombobulated. As always, you are here with your two hosts. My name is Avery Kearney, and I'm joined here tonight with
Your boy Sawyer Reed.
Soy. How are you doing, my man?
Oh, I can't complain. Nice relaxing weekend. Got out of Dodge a little bit. And feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I heard you hit up your cabin.
Oh yeah, we got out into the wilderness a little bit and it was nice.
Yeah, where's the cabin at?
Like Hayward, Wisconsin, where
Alright.
seemingly everyone from here's cabin is.
That's funny.
Yeah. How about you? Did you have a nice weekend?
Yeah, went downtown on Saturday with my girlfriend and her family, and then my family, so that was nice.
Hell yeah, that sounds like a good time.
Always fun when the families intermingle.
Oh, big time. There's usually some good laughs that come from that kind of stuff.
Some goofs and gaffs, H3 would say on the H3 podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And
Heck
then
yeah.
homework, Sunday, football, homework, the classic move.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. Sundays nowadays for me, not being in school, or like just a total weekend. Like Sundays used to be like, it's the weekend, but it's like the preamble to Monday. And now it's like, it's still the preamble, but I don't really have shit to do. It's kind of just like, get ready.
Yeah, I'm sure that takes a little getting used to too.
Mm-hmm. It took the sting out of it, but it's kind of like, wow, I really don't have anything I should be doing right now.
You prefer that?
I think so. It's it makes watching football a little more guilt free. You know, it's hard to sit down and watch Red Zone when you're like,
all
dang,
day.
dude, I gotta do 1 through 17 odd number problems for tomorrow. So I can't really watch my third game of the day.
Yeah, I always try to wake up as early as possible, usually around like 8, sometimes earlier. Sometimes I'm a psycho and I wake up at like 4:50 and then I'm just like anxious and I just shower and I'm doing homework by like 5:10.
Damn.
That happened a couple times so far this
Okay,
semester.
that's not a bad idea though, because then you can like actually enjoy your Sunday.
Well, yeah, because you know you work. Because I get a lot of papers. It's like a large portion of my homework is just writing papers. And if I wake up at 5 and I work till kickoff, that's like long. That's a big chunk of time.
It's a solid shift.
I could pound out basically an entire paper.
Yeah, that's not a bad move at all. I wish I would have done that more. I was always wake up with just enough time before kickoff to set my fantasy lineup.
Yeah, I just get so anxious about not like just getting stuff done. I just get so anxious and then I can't sleep. So there's no point in me laying and I don't know. I'm a bad sleeper in general. But.
I'm with you there. It has made sleeping on Sundays a little better for me though.
Yeah.
Not having as much crap to do.
Would you say your sleep schedule is more normal? Right. So you're working now rather than school.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make your sleep schedule more normal? Is it kind of more messed up because you have more like freedom to? You know what I mean? It's
really weird actually. That's been something I've been super like cognizant of since I started working. Is like, oh well, this sucks being up at 6:35 every day, but it's also like a bit of a schedule that your body can adapt to, and I like aspects of it, like kind of knowing when I have to be like in bed by is nice, and then knowing like every day this is when I'm gonna have to be up and at 'em. But it's been weird. When I was in school, I would have trouble falling asleep, and now that I'm like working, I have trouble staying asleep. So there'll be nights where like go to bed at like midnight, wake up at 2, wake up at 4, and then my alarm goes off at 6:30, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? Like,
I think that's because you're so like hyper aware that you need to wake up at this time or you're going to be late for work.
That's what I do think it is.
And
like,
compared to having to wake up and get to class, it's like, like if I didn't wake up and didn't go to class, that wouldn't be that big of a deal.
I can just go Wednesday and
yeah, I can
get
just
the notes.
Yeah. Or Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this, it's like, the consequences are much graver.
Yeah, for sure. Don't miss work because you slept in.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't go over well, especially when you're still on probationary period.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, so, I don't know, it's kind of nice, and eventually I've been talking about doing a flex schedule at work where you can work like 10-hour days.
Okay.
And then hit your 40-hour mark.
Leave earlier on Friday.
You can take like 1 day a week off even.
Ooh.
So I think I'm gonna take Mondays off and just work 10-hour days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Legit. 3-day weekend every weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can pick like for your schedule if you want Monday off or Wednesday or Friday or whatever. And I think I want to do Monday just so I can fully enjoy Sundays.
And then that would stay consistent. Like every week it would be Monday.
Mm-hmm. I wish you could switch it up, but
every day that would be like an HR nightmare. Imagine the person
government work
scheduling. Yeah. Person having to schedule everyone that is arbitrarily chose.
Yeah, your manager's like,
where
are you? Oh, I'm not coming today. I'm flexing.
Yeah, I'm flexing. I thought you were flexed Monday. Nah, it's Wednesday this week.
I lifted, bro. I flex whenever.
All day, every day I flex. Big time. Soy boy.
What's up?
Why are you discombobulated this evening?
That's a good question. This pod is kind of designed as an outlet to get rid of some of that discombobulated, anxious energy, and I got a couple things going on since we last recorded that have me feeling kind of queasy.
A little queasy, a little frustrated, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. The first is the Democratic debates and just the Democratic candidates in general.
Yep, it's a strange time. Everyone gets so tense.
It's crazy. Everyone's looking to argue. Everybody's wrong.
Yeah, no one's right.
No one's right, and I don't see anyone really making a formidable front to take down the current president.
Yeah, it's a strange. It's really weird because Trump's not an established politician.
No.
So it's gonna take someone not established to beat him.
Well, yeah, I
think that's the reality of it.
That's really frustrating because I don't like that a guy who didn't hold political office ever ascended to the highest one in the history of the world.
Yeah.
First try. Against a bunch of people who do this for their whole career. And so now it's kind of do we have to throw that whole concept out and just go for people who are popular enough to win a general election, or do we want someone in there who's going to actually handle business?
Yeah, it's such a weird time, and considering that this was our first election that we were able to vote for.
Oh, I know. You're telling me.
It is funky.
But I don't want to dance.
Because think of our parents, however many elections they've been through,
mm-hmm.
a lot. They just all been the boring, stale. I don't know. These might not be the right adjectives. Depend how you.
Yeah, it's hard because we didn't live through them, but kind of set in stone. You know what you're gonna get. It's two guys.
Two old white men.
One wears a blue tie, the other wears a red, and they're pretty much talking about the same thing. They just have a few dogmatic phrases they have to slip in there to appease their side of the fence.
For sure.
And so now it's well, shoot, none of these people are really gaining steam, and meanwhile, we've got a guy who chirps generals and has no prior political experience pulling the strings right now, and it seems like he just gets stronger every time someone makes a run at him. So that's got me feeling real discombobulated.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're gonna do, what the nation's gonna do. I mean,
thrives where people shouldn't thrive.
Yeah, it's weird. It's super weird, and
especially in politics.
I'm not saying I'm a hardcore left of the fence Democrat, but I just don't want Trump again. And right now it seems like they're not even able to prop one person up to be his opponent. They're all fighting themselves, and it seems like an old martial arts time war movie where it's some evil Shaolin is trying to have the tribes fight each other so they can't unite to fight him.
Yeah,
it's just a weird.
Well, as we were saying, we think it would take an unconventional, type of candidate, because
mm-hmm.
unconventional person to run against. The Democratic Party has that in Andrew Yang.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right in front of their faces, on the biggest stages, on the biggest debates.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even get the time on the debates.
No, it sucks. He's not getting the shine he should.
He has a real formidable platform. He has a lot of followers, and these are like the type of followers that like are. It's not like the conventional, like we're talking. They're not conventional followers. They're diehard Yang Gang people.
Yeah, as opposed to diehard like liberals.
Yeah, just like the older generation of like the people that want Biden or even Warren.
Mm-hmm.
These are like young, passionate people, and these are the people that are going to be voting longer than the already established voters.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
What I mean?
They're going to vote in the next 15 elections.
If you want to shape, yeah,
so it'd be cool, and I don't know. I feel like he's. I think some of where Trump got his appeal was he's a businessman.
Yeah.
And Yang is like a legit businessman.
Yang is like a businessman with like fantastic ethics, and
who's not compromised by tax loopholes. And
he's done like extremely meaningful work his whole life.
Yeah, he's not a real estate mogul who claims tax loophole, use is what makes you a good businessman. He's like a legit, like you said, ethical guy who has kind of made his own way, as opposed to someone who...
It's extremely cool, his story. His parents were, I think, he's like a first generation. I think his parents migrated to America.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think his dad is an engineer, and then he was like a mathematician, engineer type too.
Yeah, it's way cooler than hearing I started with a small loan of $1 million from my father.
Yeah, in like the sense of business, if you think of business as making profit, yes, Trump killed that game.
Yeah.
But if you want to think of business as much more than making profit, Yang has made a lot of money.
Absolutely.
As well. But he did it literally like creating Trump created jobs for other people, but it's kind of a different avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And the pushing of like learning math, education, it's different. And then his whole platform on, kind of being the guy that's saying, hey, artificial intelligence is coming, and our entire economy is going to be different.
Yeah, completely dictated.
If we don't realize this and figure it out, we're going to be in a lot of trouble down the road. So let's start thinking about it now.
This isn't something you want to have sneak up on you.
It's the same type of thing Elon talks about.
Yeah, I know. And
you got this guy running for president, maybe take him seriously.
I certainly would, and I don't know, he's probably my favorite candidate to emerge so far.
Yeah,
there's a couple good ones, but yeah, the Democratic debates and candidacy Ferris wheel have got me kind of discombobulated tonight.
Yeah.
You got anything weighing heavy on you, or spinning around?
I'm actually not particularly. I'm not too discombobulated tonight, but
there we go. I'd love to hear it.
I listened to a Jocko podcast with Dakota Meyer, who's a Marine.
Oh yeah, that was tremendous.
And he has a story that you can't even put to words. He was in a very deadly battle. He was the only one that survived. So his whole squad, his whole team, they all died besides him.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of touching on you mentioned that no one's right, no one's necessarily right or wrong in this. It's kind of all
until
arbitrary.
After the fact.
Part of his story is Afghan soldiers snuck up behind him, and they basically were in a grappling match with heavy gear, with guns also. Yeah. So he ends up having to beat a guy to death with a rock, and he's on top of him, hitting him in the face. And there's a moment where they both kind of look he looks at the guy, and he realizes that he's gonna die. And he said there was some touch of humanity there. When you look someone in the eye. We don't know, obviously, but he realized that this guy's no more right than me, no more wrong than me. We're both fighting for something that doesn't really exist,
but they both believed in.
It's a belief, and that's an extremely powerful sentiment, I think.
I think especially in this climate too, it kind of really hits home that we're way more alike than we are different, and just because you like a guy in a red tie and I like a guy in a blue tie doesn't really change the fact that we both want to be able to just thrive.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that people are willing to fight and die for these beliefs is very powerful.
I agree. That was a pretty moving podcast. I think it's episode 115 maybe of the Jocko
right.
podcast.
If you just look up Jocko podcast Dakota Meyer, it'll pop up, and he's an incredible guy.
10 out of 10 recommend that one.
And then it's just very sad, but you realize that you also mentioned that times are tense during these debates, but it's all relative.
Absolutely.
Try not to take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
There's a lot more people out there that are a lot more serious than you,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's I mean, another thing that's kind of had me feeling a little off center or discombobulated the last week or so since we last recorded has been the conflicts in Turkey and Syria. I don't know a ton on the issue. I just kind of see what makes its way through to me on Twitter or hear people talk about. And I don't know. I've seen stuff that like we pulled our troops out and then people started using our bases and we had to bomb our old bases that weren't evacuated properly, so there was like functioning equipment left at these bases, and then it was inherited by other forces, and we bombed those, and then like I don't even really know. I don't know what's going on basically, and I'm a little too nervous to like look into it or busy or whatever. Just rather not pay attention, and that doesn't really bode well with me. I'm not a big fan of like blissful ignorance, and so to feel myself doing it kind of gets me feeling queasy.
Yeah,
You know anything about?
I'm in the same boat as you, and as far as that's concerned, the only one of the thoughts I have is it's been a long-standing war between the Kurds in Syria. One side's a lot more powerful than the other side. Like the Kurds, they're like a minority, right?
Yeah, they don't have a country set up around them.
And Syria is willing to use the most violent measures to take out the Kurds. We've been kind of in the middle, helping out the Kurds. They've been helping us, with ISIS battles, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's a matter of how long do we want to help. That's arguments I've read. Like how long can we stay? But also, we have such a strong military. We have no problem trying to build up entire countries. We've fought 2 entire wars trying to reconstruct countries.
Yeah.
Why give up on this tiny little population of people when we have the resources to continue helping them? But if you can ever resolve the problem,
how long can you just throw resources and time at it until?
Yeah.
No, it's a tough one, and I don't know. It's something that I definitely need to educate myself on a little bit more. But we have a friend who sent into a group chat some stuff that was like perturbing him, where Trump was saying, I may not have the quote exactly, but basically that the Kurds didn't join us in our efforts during World War II, so why should we help them? And it's just like, well, what?
Yeah,
How does that?
I don't even understand that.
How does that translate? Like the world was completely different geopolitically back then, so that one's got me feeling pretty wild as well. Do you have anything other than the grim realities that come from a insightful military podcast with Dakota Meyer that have been discombobulating you?
Yeah.
Because it has been a pretty light week. I'm with you. I'm not super off kilter, but
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about Antifa because I see videos all the time. Especially Trump had a rally here, and there's like wild videos of like just like screaming and all the typical stuff you see.
For sure.
I just think there's literally not a use for Antifa in this country.
Yeah, it kind of seems to me that it's not a very united front.
No, it's not, and that's kind of the whole point. Is like they don't have leadership. It's kind of like the people's party in a sense, because there's no hierarchical structure to it.
Yeah, there's no talking heads.
But if you look back, it was started in the 1920s as a response to Mussolini's rise, a very violent regime.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know it went back that far.
Yep. So basically, this Mussolini, a very violent authoritarian leader, willing to use violence, a lot of violence type of, you know. So this group formed saying we will fight back.
Okay.
We have no problem using violence.
To counter
Violence with violence.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Especially when the initiator of violence is just doing unspeakable, horrible stuff and taking over a country. You know, that makes a good deal of sense and is pretty appealing.
Yeah, so like let's grab all our resources and try to fight back for maybe a better cause, because we're not authoritarian leaders, we're the people. We're gonna fight back.
Which is, I mean, it kind of has some echoes of how the United States was founded. You know, it's like tyrannical, evil,
there's
oppressive, whatever you want to fight it.
There were anarchists in the United States too and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now, I'm of the mindset to try to eliminate violence totally from our politics. And what irritates me is when they show up to like Trump rallies and they are inciting violence, because just the fact that they're Antifa, there's a violent connotation to it because they were founded that way. And if you don't like what's being said in a Trump rally, you can't show up and beat the shit out of people, basically.
Yeah, no, that's not like the political ideas and freedoms that have made what this country is possible.
Yeah, and there are groups. See, the Proud Boys is a group on the right that kind of they stomp around with armor and stuff too. But
yeah, they're trouble.
That the same sentiment as I say for them, but I feel like Antifa stirs the pot, and the major distinction I want to make between Antifa and the Proud Boys is Democratic leaders support Antifa. They say we love what Antifa is doing. That same, the right doesn't support the Proud Boys or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's being encouraged, and I hate that so much.
Yeah, I'm with you. It kind of seems like it's being encouraged because of almost like a branding thing, you know?
No, you're totally right.
Like the way they're presenting themselves on paper.
Yeah.
You know, they claim they're
anti-fascist. We're not really. This isn't a fascist country, and people say all sorts of wild things about Trump being a fascist, but he is not a fascist. A fascist can exist in a federalist government that has free elections.
Yeah, not at all. And I mean, there's things that happen that you could maybe say this is at the trailhead of how you get to fascism. But we're not
It's right of center.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing as fascist.
I agree.
It's just stupid rhetoric that's actually turning into violence, and that's not great to see.
No, and it's very discombobulating.
It doesn't help anyone either. Like, people see Antifa and they go, oh my god, and they associate it with Democrats.
Yeah, I know.
And then
that's a scary slope.
Fringe, especially when leaders are supporting it on the Democratic side. That turns me off.
Yeah, that's not an endorsement I want to hear someone I like give.
And to beat Trump, you're going to need to get all the fringe voters you can. And if you want to get a lot of fringe voters, don't support Antifa.
I agree with that. I mean, I feel like a lot of the ways he was able to kind of pull some of the fringe voters his way last election was by appealing to draining the swamp, national security, a bunch of stuff that on paper sounds really good. Well, maybe doesn't sound really good, but he's like, I'm a businessman, I'm not affiliated with all this stuff, and he was able to kind of win over fringe voters by putting forth ideas that are very practical and right in front of a lot of voters. And then if you're kind of relying on your endorsement of Antifa to bring people over, it's a pretty polarizing thing to see videos of people in armor directing traffic.
Yeah.
Or
that is bizarre too. That's so bizarre.
Knocking the hat off of someone and then kicking them as they try to pick it up.
There's no worse way I can imagine to try to get someone to support you than block them on their way to work.
Right?
That is so silly to me.
Yeah, and Yeah, that's a really frustrating one because, you know, the whole idea of like a protest or anything like that is that you kind of have to affect change by making something worth paying attention to, and that's a very fine line. But when you're like aggressively and threateningly telling people they can't drive down a road, you're not enticing them if they're on the fence at all. You know, you might even be pushing them towards the other way.
Yeah, and that's what you don't want to do.
Exactly.
And I also want to make a distinction, because you could be authoritarian but not a fascist. Trump definitely has authoritarian tendencies, and what I mean by authoritarian is, you know, he like doesn't like change. He likes tradition in like the traditional conservative sense, like, you know, religion, you know, just all the kind of the buzzwords you hear.
And taxes.
Authoritarianism is a thing. What's bad is when an authoritarian gains power in not a federalistic system, because it's so hard to get like something done as a politician. There's so many steps and checks and balances.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very cliche. But the system is in place and the system works, and you're not going to be a fascist authoritarian leader in this country. You're not able to do that.
No, not under this system. So unless, you know, he gets in for like a third term or starts doing stuff that's outside the lines of our current setup system, you can't call him a fascist.
Yeah, I agree.
You can be wary and be like, look, this right here has the potential to develop into something that gets really, really ugly really, really quick. We gotta, you know, try to curb this or prevent it from going forward. But you can't say, I don't like what he's doing. This policy makes me feel uneasy. Label him fascist.
Yeah, and I think this system is in place to stop that sudden bad, swift change, you know, towards it. But yeah, I just wanted to make the distinction, because I don't want to sound like this freaking Trump guy.
No, it's an important distinction.
And, you know, I study politics, and this could be like such a trivial thing, like me trying to make a distinction between a fascist and an authoritarian, but that stuff really does matter.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Definitions are very important in every field.
Absolutely, and yeah, it's kind of crazy, the stuff that, I mean, the little distinctions like that can go a long way. Like, I found out a pretty interesting little thing that's got me sort of discombobulated this week. It kind of has to do with like the importance of little nuances or decisions or whatever. Someone sent me a thread by a guy on Twitter named Bill Houlihan, or Houlihan. He's Irish, so, you know, I'm tempted to say Houlihan, I don't get too often.
The O'Carney clan.
But it talks about like kind of this idea of like the importance of like bureaucratic choices, and it connects like Roman war chariots to the space shuttle in kind of an interesting way. So the people who designed the railroad system in the United States were the same people who set up British wagon tramways over in United Kingdom before railroads were a thing. And that's like those things where you see people alternating, pushing down on like the lever, and that's what propels them along.
Yeah.
Well, those were designed to fit like the common width of wagon wheels. And the common width of wagon wheels was determined by the ruts formed in roads built by the Roman Empire. So they built roads all across Europe, and people would build wagons. Well, if you built them too wide or too narrow, they would break on these ruts in the road. And these ruts in the Roman roads were created by Roman warhorse chariots, and then persisted through time. And Roman warhorse chariot wheelbases were designed to fit 2 warhorses in there to pull it. So when the first space shuttles were being created, the rocket boosters that were attached to them,
the same width?
Like their design was not fully maximized for efficiency.
Okay.
They were supposed to be wider than they were, But to ship them from the factory to the launch site, they had to use railways. And the width of the railway determined how wide a tunnel was through a mountain.
Yeah.
So the ideal manufacture and design of these rocket boosters wouldn't fit through this tunnel. So ipso facto, Roman warhorse asses and their width determined the width of rocket boosters on space shuttles.
Damn. That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
That's ridiculous.
And like,
Makes perfect sense though.
and that's something that like, I don't know, that really had me feeling kind of in a tiff, because it's like, well, how many of these things exist but no one knows how to trace them back or where they came from?
I'm sure very many things.
You know, I think a lot of stuff like within who we are and what we do comes from just the fact that it was like an established practice, and you know, through maybe ideas, like political ideas that hammer home like make America great or keep America great, this kind of thing, where they're against change, you know, kind of help promote things where it's like the same metric that was used back in the Roman Empire is still used in space exploration.
Yeah, that's wild.
You know?
I know, like, the history of medicine has a lot of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
This one lady was on Joe's podcast, and she was talking about all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, because it's important to think about.
It's really cool when you start
roots.
tracing stuff back, and you kind of realize like how simple and complex everything is
Simple and complex.
at the same time, you know, and that's kind of
put it.
It's frustrating.
Discombobulating
Yeah,
is all hell.
Absolutely. Well, should we move on to the OPE of the week?
Yeah, buddy.
All right. You got one this week?
Yeah, we're gonna do the OPE of the week segment. If you don't know what an OPE is, figure it out.
Come to the Midwest and hang out for a couple days. We'll learn you good.
Yeah, you'll be able to get insane. A few times. So a little story. The shuttle that I was riding, or the bus I was riding at the U of M, broke down, which like, doesn't normally happen.
I never had that happen when I was there.
Like, I've had shuttles get stuck in the snow before, but just like this bus, like we stopped at a stop, and then just made like this really deep weird noise in the engine, and then all the doors started opening and shutting super fast, and then it was just wild. So like for a little while we couldn't get off because like we would have been like smoked by the door basically. But then like that finally settled down, and then the bus driver let us off. So I had to walk super far basically. And then this kid got off the bus at the same time. A lot of people did, and he like flagged me down. He's like, hey, blah blah blah. I forget his name. But he just started talking to me, and that's good and all, but when I have when I have a 10-minute walk somewhere and like I got my headphones in, you know how it is. Like when you're walking,
you're trying to just get her done.
Yeah, I'm walking around campus. I don't really want to talk to anyone.
Hence the headphones kind of
how times are. You just kind of put your headphones in, whatever. So abnormal to be having a conversation with a stranger walking down the street. That doesn't happen to me very often.
Yeah, so maybe it's because of the bus or whatever. Like, guys kind of discombobulated, like, holy shit, dude, the bus just broke down. You ever had that happen?
Yeah, no, literally, that's what he says. He's like, hey, like, does that happen often? I'm like, no. So I just figured he was like a freshman, you know, like looking for a friend or whatever.
Yeah.
Asked me where I was going. I'm like, oh, I'm going to McDonald's. And then he's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Kept talking. I'm like, okay. And it was a great conversation. He was asking me, you know, all sorts of stuff about me. I was asking stuff about him, you know, our majors, what we want to do, blah, blah, blah. He's a civil engineer.
Oh, okay.
He did a lot of, like, he went to Guatemala this past summer and did Engineers Without Borders type of thing, and we were talking, but he kept mentioning his mentor.
Okay.
Which is, I feel like it was just so weird, because we would be talking, he'd be like, yeah, I went to Guatemala, civil engineering. My mentor, it doesn't make any sense really.
He was getting brought up all the time.
He said that like 2 or 3 times, and then finally I was like, what does your mentor do? You keep saying your mentor. Yeah. And he's like, it's kind of hard to explain. The way he said it to me is he has like this asset on the side, and it keeps growing, and he makes like $300K. And then my response was, it's good that it's on the side, and he does something else, and he's like, yeah, he has a job, and which is it's very odd.
Pretty vague.
And then we kept walking, more normal conversation about like school and stuff, and he said he was from Hawaii, blah blah blah, and it ended with him going, yeah man, if you want to have a video call with my mentor, he'll tell you all about it. And this was after like 5 minutes of him not mentioning his mentor, so like it was just another random injection into conversation of the mentor. And I was just like, I kind of laughed and said, no man, I'm good, I don't want to video chat your mentor. And he's like, oh, alright man, and he shook my hand, and I'd never be seen again.
That was it?
Just an ope of the week right there, because I was just like, man, I thought this guy was genuinely, like, just wanted to talk and have a friend. He's a cool guy, but it was just so odd.
He was peddling some sort of mentorship,
like a
Ponzi scheme
type pyramid, like multiple level marketing or something. You know?
That's Scott.
Like, yeah, like you invest in here and then you go here, and it was just
oofta.
But
yeah,
it was
that's a big ope.
It was bizarre. It was banana lands, as Biz Nasty would say. It was very odd.
I mean, like, as someone who also went to the U, that would be like an ope in and of itself if the bus broke down. Like, I'd be walking around like, God damn, these buses, dude, they can't even make it from here to here without
breaking down.
The doors smoking someone as they spastically open and close.
You know, and a guy actually tried to get out, and he got his hand jammed in, and it was pretty horrible. Actually.
Damn.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah,
he pulled it out right away, but it was like, oh god. And it was so hot because so many people on the bus, crammed as can be.
Oh, I guess
stopped beaming in the sun.
Oofta.
Not great. You got any opes that you can think of, or normal week?
Pretty standard week.
That's the thing with opes for us; they just happen. You know.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's like I probably drop an ope once a day.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of, I don't know. They have to be pretty severe for me to like commit it to memory.
Yeah, like a crazy freaking mentor hypnotization and
yeah, that ope indeed.
Not normal.
Yeah, not at all. So if you're cool with switching gears for a moment,
let's switch gears.
Okay, I got a little like quiz questionnaire kind of thing for you. My sister did to me the other day. She came home from school and was like, "Hey, do you have a couple minutes?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What's going on?" She's like, "I want to ask you 3 questions, so I'm gonna ask you and our listeners those 3 questions."
First question: do you have a mentor?
Second question: does he have assets on the side?
That grow?
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get into the semantics of what I'm asking you here afterwards. But the first question, I want you to think of your favorite color, and using 3 adjectives, I'd like you to describe it. The second question, I want you to think about being in a completely white room, no visible light sources, it's just lit, there's nothing in it except you and your thoughts. You can kind of think of like a padded room in a mental institution if you can't conceptualize white nothingness, because that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
But just a white empty room, and you think about your feelings, come up with 3 words that would best describe how that makes you feel. And then the third question being, in 3 adjectives, describe your favorite food.
Alright.
And so I was kind of like, well, I don't really see where you're going with this, assista, but sure, we'll run it. And so for the favorite color, I threw down translucent, calm, and soft. You know?
Yeah.
I'm picturing like a kind of deep sea blue green mixture kind of deal, and that's kind of what came to me. So I'm interested, what'd you come up with?
Yeah, so 3 adjectives that describe my favorite color.
Mm-hmm.
Still.
Okay.
Dark. And tiring.
Interesting.
And can I say my favorite color?
Yeah, absolutely.
Black.
Okay. I like that.
I like black. I like black shirts, sweatshirts. A lot of my clothes are black.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's the color you see when you fall asleep, right?
Yeah.
I like black hot rods too.
Oh, hell yeah. Love to hear it. So these questions are kind of representative. So she was explaining to me that this first question, describe your favorite color in 3 words, is representative of describing how you think of yourself.
Oh Lord.
Is what color is supposed to be. So I apparently think of myself as translucent, calm, and soft, which, you know, calm and soft aren't super far off, but no one else has ever called me translucent.
I guess maybe like in the winter we get pretty pale.
Yeah.
We're from Minnesota too.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean,
I
if you see my thighs in the dead of January, it might
you don't
be
even see
considered.
them, right?
Yeah, it's capillaries and carotid arteries.
So for me, I said still.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of goes with calm. We're both pretty chill and
Mm-hmm. Sort of even keel.
yeah, dark. That's a heavy word
That
to
can
call
get-
someone. But man, maybe. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. You know.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you.
I definitely enjoy reading about like crazy, messed up things.
I like embracing the dark side. I'll give you that.
Yeah, like I love like reading about like gulags and
Mm-hmm.
political like violence and
Mm-hmm. Or hearing like Dakota Meyer's story, very moving because you can kind of
Very
embrace the
dark.
darkness in it.
and like some of my favorite movies are like the torture porn kind of stuff. Good grief. And then tiring.
What do you think of that?
I don't think I'm that tiring of a person, but I think I maybe I'm tired sometimes.
Okay.
But I'd like to think I don't tire people out.
I mean, we do podcasts almost on a weekly basis, and I'm usually leaving with more energy than I came in with. So
Yeah.
I think while the color black may be tiring, I don't attribute that to you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
So
I think we're 2 for 3 though, for both of us.
I think so too. I mean,
Arguably you're translucent.
oh yeah, you get that Norwegian blood in me.
That's funny, so.
Deprive me of the sun for a couple months, and you can almost read right through me. So the second question, describe the feeling of being in a white nothingness empty room. I came up with maddening, gasping, and silent. Maddening because there's just nothing to do, and after a while I feel like I would kind of drive myself crazy. Gasping, like gasping for air, but air in this sense represents like literally anything. You know, I just need some sort of stimulus or some sort of something to do. And then silent because there's nothing in there but me. So unless I start singing, you know, Young Dolph lyrics to keep myself sane,
Yeah.
it's gonna be pretty silent.
Very silent.
So what'd you come up with to describe a white
yeah,
room?
I said anxious,
Okay.
kind of like maddening. I feel like if I would just get so anxious,
Mhm.
with nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to be super corny or anything, but discombobulated. Perfect word.
I think that's pretty apt.
What a great podcast name too.
Oh man, it encapsulates so much.
And then concerned, because
Okay.
over sitting in a white room over
Mhm.
time, I'd get concerned about all sorts of stuff, you know.
Yeah, like your mind starts kind of running wild, and
Similar to anxious, yeah.
you just kind of like, well, what the hell's going on
Be
here?
concerned why I'm there too.
Yeah, exactly. And the question I asked didn't give a lot of context either about why you are. So
I'm worried about what this one is.
that's understanding. So this is another representative one where the white room is representative of death. So when you give those 3 answers, it supposedly represents how you feel about death.
That's really perfect.
Mm-hmm. And this one I think is probably the most, you know, hammers home,
Yeah.
or is like rings the most truth. Maddening for me. That's kind of really hard to wrap your head around the fact that we're like finite. It's kind of maddening where you're like, well, God damn it, this is crazy. I'm gonna do something that lasts forever, and I'm not gonna die. What are you talking about? I'm not dying. And then gasping is like, we're gonna die? Like, I can't. What? Start breathing. Like, there we go. And then silent. I mean, I've never been in a coffin 6 feet under, but I imagine there's not much noise.
Yeah, that's great.
So, I think your words are pretty good too. I mean,
Yeah.
you feel anxious about death?
Yeah, definitely. I'd be lying
Nah.
if you didn't.
Yeah, I think so too.
Even if you're like a insanely religious person, you're lying to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then discombobulated. Yeah.
That might be the most discombobulating thing.
Well, another definition for discombobulated is concerned, and that's my third word. So
they flow into each other nicely.
Definitely, death is very concerning. I mean, it might be the most concerning thing of all time.
Yeah, I think we're onto something. So then the third question, describe your favorite food in 3 words. Your boy came up with spicy, chewy, and steaming. I'm picturing a big plate of chicken, rice, and vegetables with some hot sauce or sriracha drizzled over.
Some stir fry.
Oh yeah, you feel me, dog?
I like that.
So that's probably my favorite food these days, and so that's kind of what comes to mind for me. What were you describing, and how did you describe it?
Yeah, so I'm describing like a big old piece, like breaded, crusted chicken. So like, yeah, breaded chicken.
Yum.
So I said juicy,
Okay.
thick, and crusty.
Ooh, okay.
So, juicy, you bite into the chicken. If it's done well, cooked in good oils, it's going to be juicy, thick,
Hell yeah.
a lot of meat, crusty.
It's got that
crusted chicken would be crusty.
Yeah, it'd be nice coated in breadcrumbs or whatever.
Yeah, what are we describing here, sorry?
So this one, here your favorite food is representative of how you feel about sex. So, I apparently think of spice being chewy and steaming.
Steamy sex.
That one kind of, it kind of hit me like a little bit. I think the delivery of like my sister asking and explaining it to me kind of discombobulated me a little bit about it, but I don't know, it's not quite as apt, but I've heard some answers from other people that were pretty good.
Yeah.
So what did you say? Juicy, thick, and crusty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Juicy, thick, crusty, no comment.
You think those are apt or semi?
Like all the questions?
Yeah, it's
I guess I would need to know like what's the science,
like how they're connecting food to sex, or like.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
The white room, I think, is probably the most telling one, where like
white room. I think the whole idea is like food you associate with like joy, and you need food even. Sex, same kind of deal. White room, death, right?
Yeah, like
so
nothingness.
These concepts are like correlated, and I'm sure that's like the backing behind it.
For sure.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny, and like one of my sister's teachers like asked the class this, and I was like, that's kind of cool.
What grade is she in?
She's a senior in high school.
Right on.
So, all the listeners out there, I hope you played along. If you had any good ones, I'll make a forum post or something, and you guys can list any good ones you might have described.
That's hilarious, though.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some really funny ones, so I'm looking forward to hopefully hearing a few more from our listeners out there.
Crusty.
Hell yeah. Absolute crust. So, I think that about wraps up all I had for the quiz. What do you got for me?
Yeah, so I want to talk about a book.
I love it.
Yeah, so this book is called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion.
Ooh.
And it's written by Jonathan Haidt.
Okay.
Who is a undergrad in philosophy from Yale. And he has his PhD in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania.
Damn.
And he is he's a psychologist, anthropologist, and he's a business professor at the University of New York School of Business.
Damn.
So he teaches like ethics and stuff, moral psychology, ethics.
Very well versed in like the ideas of being a human.
Yes, exactly. So this book, I think, does a very good job of describing politics, political psychology, why are politics the way they are.
Okay.
We have talked about politics actually a pretty good amount on this podcast so far, especially this episode.
Yeah.
And we've alluded to, just people unable to come to conclusions. People have such strong feelings towards their party. towards the other party. And what this book does is it breaks down the psychology and the human element of why we feel these ways towards politics.
That's fascinating.
So I'm gonna just kind of read the conclusion.
Okay.
And then we'll go on from there.
Beautiful. Looking forward to it.
So here's the conclusion of The Righteous Mind. In this book, I took you on a tour of human nature and human history. I tried to show that my beloved topic of inquiry, moral psychology, is the key to understanding politics, religion, and our spectacular rise to planetary dominance. I feared that I crammed too many insights into this tour, so let me close by highlighting the most important ones. So here's kind of the crash course of the book.
Okay.
In part 1, I presented the first principle of moral psychology. Intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second.
Ooh.
I explained how I came to develop the social institutionist model, and I used the model to challenge the rationalist delusion. If you bring one thing home from this part of the trip, may I suggest that it be the image of yourself and everyone else around you as being a small rider on a very large elephant. Thinking in this way can make you more patient with other people. When you catch yourself making up ridiculous post hoc arguments, you might be slower to dismiss other people just because you can so easily refute their arguments. The action of moral psychology is not really in the pronouncements of the rider. So the idea behind this is the giant elephant you are on is your intuitions.
Ooh.
And the elephant guides the rider. When you are riding an elephant, the elephant guides you. And you're very insignificant to that elephant. So it's a metaphor for your intuitions are controlling basically your political beliefs more so than strategic reasoning.
That's a fantastic analogous vehicle, because like you can, there's no such thing as ethical elephant riding, but people like get up there and they have reins on them or whatever, but at the end of the day, if you're pulling left, the elephant's going where it wants.
So yeah, the main point there is intuitions come first, strategic reasoning comes second. So next time you get all worked up, remember that this person said this thing intuitively, and what you're thinking of responding is also intuitively. So let's take a step back, let's strategically reason with each other and realize that what we're thinking is kind of sort of not our faults. It's our minds and the way they're wired to think this way.
I think there's a lot to that. I read a book not too long ago called The Mind is Flat, which was a fantastic read, and it talks a lot about Nick Chatters is the author, his interpretation or view of how the mind works, and there's a lot of similarities kind of there, where it's like your mind is just this processing unit, takes something in, organizes it in like whatever way makes the most sense at the time, and then you either never visit it again, or once it's processed, you have to kind of come up with a way to make it make sense.
Yeah, and these things happen in split seconds.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, someone says something like, late-term abortion, and before you even like have a chance to really think about what that even is, you have a way of feeling about it.
Your elephant starts going down a path that you can't control. So let's take a step back. Let's strategically reason.
So is the best way to do it to not ride elephants, or is the best way to do it ride your elephant till it gets tired and then you can start kind of controlling it, would you say?
I'd say kind of neither. I think
Okay.
the best way to combat is to be aware.
I like that.
Because we can't stop our intuitions. That's kind of the whole point. We can't stop these. But, you're still on the elephant. Be aware that this is happening. Take a step back. Reason with the other person, because they're having the same type of psychological complex happening. So we need to be hyper aware of that.
Okay, so if someone's late to your farming convention because their elephant stopped off to have a drink at the watering hole, maybe don't get so mad at them because it's an elephant. Like, good luck controlling it.
Don't write that post, on, just
control your impulses a little bit and
think a little bit harder.
I like that. I really like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue reading on here. The second part of our tour explored the second principle of moral psychology. There's more to morality than harm and fairness. I recounted my time in India and how it helped me to step out of my moral matrix and perceive additional moral concerns. I offered the metaphor that the righteous mind is like a tongue with 6 taste receptors. I presented the moral foundations theory and the research that my colleagues and I have conducted at yourmorals.org on the psychology of liberals and conservatives. So we'll get into those 6 taste receptors in a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm going to continue reading on here.
Mm-hmm.
If you take home one souvenir from this part of the tour, may I suggest that it is to be a suspicion of moral monists. So, if people have kind of a one-track mind, be suspicious of them, basically.
Okay.
Beware of anyone who insists that there is one true morality for all people, times, and places, particularly if that morality is founded upon a single moral foundation. Human societies are complex, their needs and challenges are variable. Our minds contain a toolbox of psychological systems, including the 6 moral foundations, which can be used to meet these challenges and construct effective moral communities. You don't need to use all 6, and there may be certain organizations or subcultures that can thrive with just one. But anyone who tells you that all societies in all eras should be using one particular moral matrix, resting on one particular configuration of moral foundations, is a fundamentalist of one sort or another.
Dang. That's, he said quite a bit in that half a page there.
Yeah, and once we break down what those 6 moral foundations are, it'll make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, right and wrong is not so simple.
Yeah, it's, I really like the part where he's saying, like, be wary of people who have a one-track mind or think everything can be summed up under one word. Because that is one of the more frustrating things I've found in my experience so far, is when you're trying to have, like, an earnest conversation with someone, and they keep tying it back to, like, the only laurel they can rest their argument on, where it's like, well, this, like, they're oppressing this person, like, this is wrong, you can't be doing this, and then you get into, like, the logistics of why something happened, and then they just tie it back to, like, well, this is wrong, and, like, you can't really make any headway.
Yeah, a lot of people lean on these fundamentalist ideas that are so one-track minded, and that's just, it's sloppy, it's not great, not good reasoning at all.
No, especially when you're dealing with stuff that's as complex as, like, politics or human interaction or, like, anything really that humans are involved in is, like, a super layered, real deep venture that you, if you only have a 2D map of it, you're not going to get there.
I think this is an extreme problem with our politics, is we have 2 parties. This is right and that's wrong, or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
And that literally is against our psychological makeup, as Jonathan Haidt argues.
Yeah, and I think
it's not even an argument, these are scientific facts.
Yeah, I think that ties into politics super big too, because, like, you know, you ask during a debate for Democratic candidates about something like national security or border control, and everyone has these, like, soundbite type answers that they're ready to give at a moment's notice, and they're kind of, like, impulsive and pretty one-tracked.
Yep.
That's interesting.
It's weak.
And he says that you should be wary of that. That can be a pitfall in reasoning or arguments.
Yep.
Okay.
It's kind of like the last one. Be aware of these things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah. All right. So the third and final part here. In the third part of our tour, I presented the principle that morality binds and blinds. So morality binds and blinds.
Hmm.
We are products of multi-level selection, which turned us into the Homo duplex. We are selfish and we are groupish. We are 90% chimp and 10% bee. I suggested that religion played a crucial role in our evolutionary history. Our religious minds co-evolved with our religious practices to create ever larger moral communities, particularly after the advent of agriculture. I described how political teams form and why some people gravitate to the left, others to the right.
Binds and blinds.
Binds and blinds. So your concept of right or wrong is what binds you to your group, but it's also what blinds you to the other side.
Dang, that's fascinating. That just like kind of right off the bat, it makes me think of the moment Dakota Meyer, where he's like, we looked into this man's eye and
100%.
I realized we both believed wholeheartedly what we were fighting for, and you know, they were both bound to their brothers in arms and blind to what it was they were fighting. And
Blinded by the fact that, you know, they were doing what they were doing at that time, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we are 90% chimp and 10% bee. Chimp being the groupish, sort of selfish creature, and the bees being the team that, you know, bees work together.
You have to like be a part of the hive in order to have it function.
Yep. Continue on here. If you bring one thing home from this last part of the trip, may I suggest that it is to be the image of a small bump on the back of our heads, the hive switch, just under the skin, waiting to be turned on. We've been told for 50 years now that human beings are fundamentally selfish. We're assaulted by reality TV programs showing people at their worst. Some people actually believe that a woman should shout fire if she's being raped, on the grounds that everyone is so selfish that they won't even come out to investigate unless they fear for their own lives. It's not true. We may spend most of our waking hours advancing our own interests, but we all have the capacity to transcend self-interest and become simply a part of the whole. It's not just a capacity, it's the portal to many of life's most cherished experiences.
Yeah.
So you gotta be aware of these things, and it really will change your entire outlook on politics.
Yeah, the like applicability of these three axioms or whatever to politics has been super spot on. But I mean, you've read it, so you probably have digested them a little better. But they seem like they'd be really applicable to life, even.
Totally.
Which I mean, I guess is ultimately what politics are about. But
yeah, politics and religion is kind of the centering of these arguments. But politics and religion kind of around the world, right?
Yeah, that's like the two main things that people like to kind of build their life around.
It's unbelievable. And he just kind of closes out here. He says, "This book explained why people are divided by politics and religion. The answer is not as black and white we would have it, because some people are good and others are evil. Instead, the explanation is that our minds were designed for groupish righteousness. We are deeply intuitive creatures whose gut feelings drive our strategic reasoning. This makes it difficult, but not impossible, to connect with those who live in other matrices, which are often built on different configurations of the available moral foundations. So the next time you find yourself seated beside someone from another matrix, give it a try. Don't just jump right in. Don't bring up morality until you've found a few points of commonality or in some other way established a bit of trust. And when you do bring up issues of morality, try to start with some praise or with a sincere expression of interest. We're all stuck here for a while, so let's try to work it out."
Wow, I'm extremely intrigued by this book.
It's incredible, man. It's such a good book.
He laid out, for a long time I've had like kind of issues or qualms with talking about politics on social media or other online avenues, because it seems like everyone jumps right to like fuckyou'mright.com and then hits you with a stat about why you're wrong and they're right, as opposed to like
figuring out why.
Going back and forth about what the actual issue is even.
Yeah, and I think of an example of, you know, he says to try to find some praise in someone that maybe has different thoughts of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I could think of is Democrats are more inclined to be pro like immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Conservatives the opposite. I think if conservatives looked and said, you know, I can really appreciate the fact that you care so much about these people.
Mm-hmm.
I praise you for caring this much, you know, and then Democrats could say, I can appreciate how much you want to keep traditional values that immigrants might not support in this country, kind of thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
let's start there rather than you're a fucking idiot.
Mm-hmm.
I hate you. I'm never gonna talk to
How
you.
could you fascist, like racist,
right.
scum, like yeah, that's really cool. I think we're trapped in a lot of this. I think a lot of people are trapped on the elephant, and
Yeah, and by
especially
nature.
trapped in the idea that they're steering.
Yeah,
You know,
you're certainly not steering,
no,
and everyone's on that elephant.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Do you have any like major takeaways from reading this that kind of stuck with you? That
The major takeaway for me was that, like, we have these feelings because our brains are literally wired to have these feelings.
mm-hmm.
Like we say that our intuition drives us. So I'm not gonna hate someone for thinking something that they can't even control.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's really important because a lot of people's like instinctual or intuitional reactions to things are for the most part based on their experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and everyone's experience has been different. So if you can't appreciate the fact that what they're saying comes from their version of true, then immediately it's going to turn into a I'm digging in because I'm right, you're digging in because you're wrong.
Yeah, and then
we can't make any new ground.
Nothing gets done. I want to break down the moral foundations he talks about.
Those 6 of them?
Yeah, so
okay. Yeah, please.
What we'll do is I'll read his explanation of them, and then with each one we'll kind of give our takes on it.
Alright.
To put all this together, moral foundations theory says that there are at least 6 psychological systems that compromise the universal foundation of the world's many moral matrices. The various moralities found on the political left tend to rest more strongly on the care/harm and liberty/oppression foundations. These 2 foundations support ideals of social justice, which emphasize compassion for the poor and a struggle for political equality among the subgroups that compromise society. Social justice movements emphasize solidarity. They call for people to come together to fight the oppression of bullying, dominating elites, and this is why there is no separate/equal foundation. People don't crave equality for its own sake. They fight for equality when they perceive that they are being bullied or dominated, as during the American and French Revolution and the Cultural Revolutions of the 1960s. Everyone, left, right, and center, cares about care/harm, but liberals care more. Across many scales, surveys, and political controversies, liberals turn out to be more disturbed by signs of violence and suffering compared to conservatives, especially libertarians.
So this kind of like dichotomy of care versus harm, what does he call it? A moral
foundation.
Moral foundation, okay. And what's kind of the best way to think about this? Like a divider in people's minds, or like reactions to these 2 things? Like,
an intuitive reaction that you have when you see situations of where care or harm is going to take place, and how they relate to the parties. People on the left care more about people being harmed.
Okay, interesting.
Intuitively.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely see what he's saying about progressives or liberals are typically more moved by that, when you look at some of like the justifications or what does he call it? Not intuition, but what's the second part? It's intuition first.
Strategic reasoning.
Yeah, the strategic reasoning a lot of people seem to use to like even talk about like immigration or whatever is like things like all these people are coming from a war-torn society where they're, you know, fearing for their lives or being killed or oppressed or whatever.
And that is a leftward-leaning idea.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because of this moral foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then liberty/oppression is the other one mentioned there, and that's another leftward-leaning intuition. You have more emotion towards someone being oppressed, basically.
Or their liberty being compromised.
And I like how he talks about how people don't crave equality for its own sake, but they start caring when they think that the people are being bullied or dominated. So they don't want everyone to be equal just to be equal. They want everyone to be equal because the one party is being, or the one side, the one population is being bullied or dominated.
So they don't really care about it till it shows up on their backstep. Like,
yeah, if there has to be some kind of harm, as we go back to the first one, right?
Yeah.
And then he mentions how liberals turn out to be more disturbed by violence, suffering, and then conservatives and libertarians aren't.
That's pretty fascinating. I wonder.
Much, at least. Especially libertarians who have the idea that, like, you know, like, I'm worried about kind of like myself almost. Like anyone, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not concerned with the other people suffering as much.
Until it affects me, kind of.
Yep, totally.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's cool stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think once you start breaking them down, it's starting to make, like, I'm starting to see them.
Yeah.
In a lot of like the hot button issues that are going around.
Yep. Oh yeah.
You know, like.
I definitely know.
That's pretty cool.
He'll go on to explain the liberty/oppression one a little bit more.
Okay.
So he goes, everyone left, right, and center cares about liberty/oppression, but each political faction cares in a different way. In the contemporary United States, liberals are most concerned about the rights of certain vulnerable groups, and they look to government to defend the weak against oppression by the strong. So they look for the government to help the weak. Conservatives, in contrast, hold more traditional ideas of liberty as the right to be left alone. And they often resent liberal programs that use government to infringe on their liberties in order to protect the groups that liberals care most about. That's a crazy mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, small business owners overwhelmingly support the Republican Party, in part because they resent the government telling them how to run their business under its banner of protecting workers, minorities, consumers, and the environment. This helps explain why libertarians have sided with the Republican Party in recent decades. Libertarians care about liberty almost to the exclusion of all other concerns, and their conception of liberty is the same as that of the Republicans. It is the right to be left alone, free from government interference.
That's a really kind of interesting definition of liberty that he kind of draws on there.
It's two totally different things for each party too,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
So yeah, that is going to divide you, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's I mean, like, just based on that moral foundation, you can see where a divide on like a basis of government would come from.
Totally. Like, I think of private healthcare compared to a universal-based healthcare.
Yeah.
Or Democrats want a universal healthcare to protect the people that are unfortunate enough to be without healthcare. A vulnerable group of people that doesn't have healthcare. A conservative type is going to say, I don't really care that you're being harmed because you're infringing on my liberty.
Damn.
It all ties together.
Yeah, and we're a third of the way there.
Yeah.
I've only gotten through 2, and they're already like super intertwined, and
it's wild. It's
dang,
so cool.
dude.
All right. So this is the third moral foundation. The Fairness/Cheating Foundation is about proportionality and the law of karma.
Okay.
It is about making sure that people get what they deserve and do not get the things they do not deserve. Everyone, left, right, and center, cares about proportionality. Everyone gets angry when people take more than they deserve. But conservatives care more, and they rely on the Fairness Foundation more heavily once fairness is restricted to proportionality. For example, how relevant is it to your morality? How relevant is it to your morality whether everyone is pulling their own weight? Do you agree that employees who work the hardest should be paid the most? Liberals don't reject these items, but they are ambivalent. Conservatives, in contrast, endorse items such as these enthusiastically. Liberals may think that they own the concept of karma because it's New Age associations, but a morality based on compassion and concerns about oppression forces you to violate karma in many ways. Conservatives, for example, think it's self-evident that responses to crime should be based on proportionality, as shown in slogans such as "do the crime, do the time," and "3 strikes and you're out." Yet liberals are often uncomfortable with the negative sides of karma, retribution, as shown on the bumper sticker in figure 8.7, which says, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." After all, retribution causes harm, and harm activates the Care/Harm Foundation. A recent study even found that liberal professors gave out a narrower range of grades than do conservative professors. Conservative professors are most willing to reward the best students and punish the worst.
Damn. That's, okay, the foundation here, remind me, it's fairness.
Fairness/cheating, and it's all about proportionality and the law of karma. So you should get what you deserve.
That's really, really cool to think it has like a karmic basis.
Yeah. It's very, very cool.
It sounds like it really does too. I mean, the grade example I find particularly fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. So the idea, employees who work the hardest should be paid the most.
Mm-hmm.
Liberals reject these items because what if you are incapable of working harder than someone else?
Yeah.
And conservatives who don't care about harm as much,
Mm-hmm. They're not as worried about like what you're capable of doing. They just want it to be done.
Conservatives more inclined to say 3 strikes you're out.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats more inclined to say an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
That's crazy, and they're kind of sitting on opposite ends of like a karmic teeter-totter there.
Totally.
And that's a really, really, really cool way of kind of highlighting the divide between the two, where it's like neither of them wants full-blown karma to be true. They're kind of falling into one of the earlier things he warned about, which is like one-track ideas.
Yep. Totally. It's very cool. And it tied right back into the harm.
Mm-hmm.
Because these retributions of 3 strikes you're out, they will cause harm to the person that is struck out, and harm triggers the Care/Harm Foundation.
Dang.
Ties right back in.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to explain the last 3 as in depth,
Mm-hmm.
but he goes on to explain the remaining 3 foundations: loyalty/betrayal, authority/subversion, and sanctity/degradation show the biggest and most consistent partisan differences. Liberals are ambivalent about these foundations at best, whereas social conservatives embrace them. Libertarians have little use for them, which is why they tend to support liberal positions on social issues such as gay marriage, drug use, blah, blah, blah. So, ideas of loyalty/betrayal, authority/subversion, and sanctity/degradation.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying that word right?
I think
It's a tough one.
Degradation.
Degradation.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things that basically don't apply to liberals because they don't really care. And a conservative is going to be very into the idea of loyalty and betrayal.
That's interesting.
Don't you dare burn the flag.
Or whistle blow.
Yep. Authority/subversion, same kind of idea. Conservatives are more inclined to follow the rules. And then sanctity and degradation, just think of gay marriage. They think of that as a idea of sacredness. Men and women should be together because that is a sacred idea from Christianity.
Yeah, you're degrading the sanctity of marriage by turning it into whatever best applies to you, is what they're thinking.
Just think of like the Westford Baptist people or whatever. And then I'll just do the final little summary thing here. I began this chapter by telling you our original findings. Liberals have a true foundation morality based on the care and fairness foundations, whereas conservatives have a five foundation morality. But on the basis of what we've learned in the last few years, I need to revise that statement. Liberals have a 3 foundation morality, whereas conservatives use all 6. Liberal moral matrices rest on the care/harm, liberty/oppression, and fairness/cheating foundations, although liberals are often willing to trade away fairness as proportionality when it conflicts with compassion or with their desire to fight oppression. Conservative morality rests on all 6 foundations, although conservatives are more willing than liberals to sacrifice care and let some people get hurt in order to achieve their many other moral objectives.
That's fantastic.
It's wild stuff.
So, given his take that the first 3 are what kind of drive liberals, and conservatives are more aware but maybe less affected by all 6 of them, have you kind of thought of like any ways in how that might be being used to like we were talking about earlier, like fringe voters? Like if you're a centrist kind of Republican or Democrat, would you maybe try to appeal to the 3 that don't apply to you, kind of? So like, or anything like that?
Yeah. So if you're a fringe voter,
I guess it might be more pertinent to ask, like, are there ways to figure out how you feel about these 6 foundations?
I think you know how you feel about it.
The elephant in your on will start running once you hear it, kind of deal?
It already does, because it's your intuition, right? You already have these inclinations, right? I'm someone that I feel like I'm not very sympathetic.
Okay.
I feel like I lack in sympathy. So when I hear the care/harm one, I'm more towards the conservative side. And I think with each of all 6, I lean a certain way.
Okay.
And I think once you digest, I just said a whole bunch of stuff. But once you digest that and you research a little bit more, and even if you want to read the book, which I suggest, you come to conclusions once you digest it a little bit more.
Okay.
But I think, and politicians already do this, is they try to appeal to these things. And it's a smart move for a politician to try to appeal to these moral foundations to get votes. So if Democrats want to get more fringe voters, put out political ads that trigger your care/harm moral foundation, and try to get people to get that intuitive feeling that they now associate with the Democratic Party, so they go up and vote.
That's really fascinating.
There's a whole political psychology behind campaigns and ads, and yeah.
That's pretty cool. do you think these intuitions are like set in stone when you're born, or are these something that we were kind of saying earlier where it's like based on your experience? I know that kind of gets into a very a much deeper debate about.
He talks about in the book how these triggers are they're predetermined in the sense that the elephant guides the rider.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you take a step back, you could maybe change that wiring, or at least understand it more.
Okay.
But he breaks these foundations down to what he calls original triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So in human evolution, why did we start to develop these moral foundations? I don't remember original triggers, but I know, like, man, I wish I remembered off the top of my head, but the original triggers are a very important part of it, and it makes you understand why. Like, being a parent is a care/harm one, I know.
Oh, I could see that for sure.
Like, when your kid dies, you just go, like, berserk type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Over that foundation.
Yeah, because of that foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could find the original triggers, but...
Mm-hmm. So, kind of what I'm getting out of this, I mean, this book sounds like it would be, like, extremely fascinating and provide a lot of insight, but kind of from what I've heard, the main takeaway is, like, the importance of awareness.
For sure. Because morality can bind you, but it could also bind us.
Mm-hmm.
So be aware and try to find some commonality.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, I might borrow that from you.
Yeah, you definitely can. I got my fix tonight.
That's sweet. I really like that.
Jonathan Haidt is the guy. It's Haidt. And the book is called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And I actually had to read it for a political psychology class.
Oh, okay.
My professor is a badass PhD in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a lot of work on the psychology of authoritarianism.
Ooh.
So he kind of has similar arguments about authoritarians are inclined to think certain ways because of basically the way their mind's wired kind of deal. Heavy reliance on tradition and stuff like that. And
yeah.
That could be pulled right into some of the foundations that he talked about.
That's really cool. Well, I'm gonna be examining where I think I stand on those 6 foundations a little more now.
Yeah, just like write them down and really think about it. And then it's cool because you realize once you're kind of aware of where you stand, you could understand where other people stand better and why. And then that's where you try to find that commonality.
That's important too, I think, to like that you take that route to get to that commonality, because like he was saying, you might want to start with complimenting something about the opposition's view, and you can't really do that unless you've thought through it yourself and been like, well, on this issue, I wholeheartedly agree with this, and then this I kind of agree with, but it leads to this.
Yeah.
And so I can't really champion it.
It's very cool.
Yeah. I'm gonna borrow that from you.
Yeah, buddy.
If you're finished up with her for schooling purposes, because you got me hooked.
For sure. Closing message. Sawyer, we gotta start thinking about why we think the way we do, and use that to try to understand why people think the way they do, rather than instantly screaming and being mad. Let's try to all be better together.
I like that a lot.
'Cause we will all be better that way.
Yeah, I agree.
It's very corny, but when you freaking break it down to why your brain and how it's wired, it's not corny at all. It's insane.
For sure. I think I wholeheartedly agree with that. And if you're ready, that kind of flows a little bit into perhaps with what we can close with, our concept of the week.
For sure.
I've been thinking a lot lately about the concept of like the self, And as you were reading excerpts from that, it kept coming up over and over for me. Between, like, what are you in yourself? What is important to that concept of yourself? And so I guess, before we get too deep, like, what do you consider the self as it pertains to you?
The self as it pertains to me.
Yeah, do you have like a...
I'm trying to think of like a sentence definition, which is tough. I feel like that the self is the things that you hold the most dearly to you.
Okay, so maybe like where you stand on those 6 moral foundations kind of makes up like yourself. Things like that.
Yeah, or even just like the reasons you do the things you do, even. You know? Like, what gets you excited? What gets you passionate? What gets you mad? What gets you sad? I think a collection of that is the self.
Those things kind of form the gestalt that is yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can get behind that. It's hard because, like, at least for me, like, it's hard to kind of come up with what the self is as it pertains to me, because it's like a kind of horrifying nightmare to have to, like, exist.
Yeah, and it always changes and shit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a person who grows over time, then it's hard because you have to constantly, like, tear it down and rebuild it or whatever. But I like being able to introduce, you know, like, moral foundations as maybe an aspect of it.
For sure.
But I've been really struggling with or contemplating the idea of the self lately, because, like, as I get into what I think I am, it kind of starts illuminating that I'm really nothing more than, like, the connection between whatever I am and the outside world.
Yeah, so it's the idea that, like, you are what other people perceive you as.
Yeah, kind of. So, like, I think of myself, like, when I think of what I am, I'm like, you know, some of the fundamental ones are like, I'm a son, you know, and that's only true, like, in relation to other people.
Yeah.
You know, like, I can only be a son to my mom and my dad. You know, I can't be a son, like, on my own, kind of thing. And, so yeah, I've just been, like, thinking a lot lately that the idea of, like, the self is maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say wrong, because everyone has their own interpretation of it, but, like, that maybe we need to reconsider exactly what it means to be a self.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson, I'm gonna not say this as eloquent as him, but he, like, your identity is a, like, series of compromises you've made with other people.
Okay.
So you are, like kind of what I said earlier, like, you're a collection of who other people perceive you as, because you can impose this idea of who you think you are, but if no one thinks you're that, are you? Then really are that? You? Yeah. And this is kind of a different, kind of off the rails here, but, like, the relation of the self with the state, that's where it gets really interesting. And I think this is, like, a whole other thing, but, like, arguments against, like, gender pronoun laws and stuff is your whim of the self, who you are, shouldn't be written into the law, because what if I refuse that notion of who you think you are? So that kind of adds on to you're just a collection of compromises people make with you, which makes you feel very, like, insignificant and not important. But
yeah,
the self, it ties right into the word selfish, right? It's interesting as fuck.
Yeah, for sure. It's I don't know, the more I started, like, thinking about it, I was trying to come up with things that I do, you know, like, solely for myself or whatever, you know, like, oh, I'm just working out for myself, or I just want a good, well-paying job, you know, for me, or whatever. There's a lot of different things people say they're doing for themselves, you know, or like I'm gonna take a bubble bath and do a skincare routine tonight just for myself, you know. And like the more I started thinking about it, the more I realized like that I don't think a lot of the stuff I've done supposedly for myself are completely rooted in like selfish reasons. You know, it's like I'm doing some of this stuff because it'll change the way I interact with other things, as opposed to like how I look at myself in the mirror or whatever.
Yeah, I love where this concept went, because it makes me feel like there is no self now.
You know what I mean? Like
now I'm leaning towards like, you know, like, is there even the self?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you hear, I don't know, and that kind of gets into like perhaps the way people feel about themselves can kind of be determined or play into like some of these moral foundations we were talking about. Like if you tend to think more on the side of like there is such a thing as the self and your own entity operating in your universe and making it yours, you might not be as inclined to like feel compassion towards people who are harmed.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're someone who is like, you know, what am I without others? You know, then you might be more leaning towards like, if that's true, then I want others to be good because then I'll be good.
Yeah, more care.
Yeah.
And if it is the elephant, the intuition guiding that, it's not really like you. It's your So that's where you want to step back. Maybe step back, be more hyper aware that the self may not be what you think it is, and maybe that's how you find yourself. Crazy times.
Yeah, for sure. That's
crazy time to be alive.
Isn't it?
It is.
I mean, like that whole idea of like the concept of the self has kind of like presented itself through like listening to other people talk and like reading stuff online and like surfing Twitter and like seeing stuff about like a little bit of everything. And you know, we're in a world right now where everything's so connected that you're able to kind of use this like incredible connection to other people to figure out what you are on your own, you know. Whereas before, without the ability to connect to people from Ireland and hear crazy threads about where railroad track wit came from
a horse's ass.
Yeah, you like might not ever consider that and just think more isolatedly. That's a word, by the way, isolatedly. You might think more in like an isolated sense of what a self is, because like you aren't able to establish these connections that can exist once they're there.
Yeah, and to go on, last thing I'll say is, you mentioned like social media and connection. A lot of that stuff you portray is artificial, not like actually, you know, it's like a facade.
Yeah, you're kind of putting on a show.
Here's me, here's the self, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, you like, I mean, food, you know, people post pictures of like meals sometimes, and it's very rarely like, I went to Culver's today and had a double butter burger with a concrete mixer.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of it. It's always like, I went above and beyond like the, you know, easy or normal things I might eat to try to like treat myself or treat myself better.
Like this one time I cooked something and here's a picture and like that portrays me as always cooking.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna have like 4 pictures on my main Instagram of food, but none of them are gonna be
what I
entirely representative of what I have for lunch every day.
Yeah, man.
You know?
We've talked ourselves into a discombobulated state.
I agree.
And I think that is how we should end every podcast from now on, is destroy our minds.
I'm wholeheartedly down, because I kind of come into these, you know, pretty discombobulated.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I'm starting, I'm like not even sure why. Whereas now when I'm driving home, I'll at least be able to like kind of pull on some threads. Whereas before I just had a shitty sweater.
Yeah.
You know, and now it's like, well, I know where these holes are coming from. So, yeah, I think think I'm satiated enough.
Yeah, I think that was great.
I do too. That was a nice talk. We hit quite a few things, and we didn't even have to talk about the piss poor season the Wild are having, or that was a good one.
We hit it. All right, everybody.
For sure.
Thank you for listening. This is the Discombobulated podcast. I'm Avery Kearney. We're here with Sawyer Reed as well.
Appreciate you guys listening and sitting through with us.
Yep. Have a good night, day, morning, whenever you're listening.
Yeah, take care and let us know what you think.
Discombobulated podcast.
Discombobulatedworld.com is now live.
Subscribe.
Make an account, subscribe,
Peace out.
all that. See you, folks. Yeah, I think that might be our best one so far.
For sure.
Hell yeah.
I think bringing in a book is a good idea.
I do too.
I think
it gives kind of like a tangible something to touch on or expand on.
Yeah, Sean O'Malley, the UFC fighter. He's got to do with an afro. He's like to do with the afro.
Okay,
I'd
have to see him.
Shit, the weed guy.
Yeah.
He has a podcast, and they always read like a couple pages from like a crazy ass book, because that just makes you talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of it brings up things that some people may not have heard before too, and
and it's like, we have like a finite idea of like things that like me and you could just like come up with and talk with,
Yeah, exactly.
But if we introduce a guy that dedicated his whole life
to like this one idea, then you can get a lot deeper than we could get by.
Or even our concept of the self. I feel like it was amazing because we did that first.
I agree for sure. It's like it gives you something to kind of tie back to also, or call back.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm so sweaty.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was badass.
That was really good.
That was badass, man.
And it works out perfectly with